If you could be perfect parents, two things would go wrong. Number one, your kids would never leave home. And second, your kids would never need God. I didn't enjoy my children as much as I should have because I was so afraid of being proud.
Yeah.
And I watched other couples since then just doting on their kids and enjoying them so much. And I thought, oh, I thought that was a sin, and it just looks like so much fun. And I think I could have built more self-confidence in my children if I hadn't been so afraid to be too proud of them. And it was quiet for a while, and then the Lord said, I don't owe you anything. I was very shocked because I would never have had the gall to say God owed me something. Mm-hmm. It was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
And I have thanked my son for running away from home because it transformed my spiritual life. I no longer was reading the Bible to check it off as one more good thing I'd done. So that's my advice. Get what you really need from the Lord, and then you're free to just be an encouragement and a joy to your husband.
Ruth Enns.
Yes.
Will you tell me your full name?
Well, it's Agnus Ruth Enns.
When were you born?
1945.
Where were you born?
Sexsmith.
Okay.
In
Go ahead.
Johanna's Nursing Home, it was called.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the time. You're telling me an interesting little story about the year you were born and a message your father wrote to you in your Bible.
Oh, yes. He took a brand new Bible the day I was born and wrote in the front of it, giving me a blessing, and then saying at the end that he had just listened to the news that Berlin had given in to the Russians that day, surrendered to the Russians.
Yeah.
So it was a critical day in the war.
Okay.
So.
And how did you discover that, or rediscover that Bible, and then
Oh, you want
message?
That part?
Yeah.
Okay, well, my parents had moved 18 times, and with them went something that I didn't know. It showed up later. I had a friend that lives up in Fairview, and she called me saying she was feeling overwhelmed with stuff she needed to sort. So I talked to the Lord, and he said, sure, you can help her. So I called, and they said, come. So I went, and I started sorting stuff, and I came to her, and I said, I found something of yours that I want. Mm-hmm. And so I showed her. It was an Edmonton Journal, dated May 2nd, 1945. And big headlines, Berlin falls to Russians. So I said, I know that something like that my dad wrote in the Bible the day I was born. And I said, where did you get this? She said, I got it from your sister. And here she'd been helping my sister sort some stuff at their house, and Evangeline said to her, oh, just take this box of old newspapers and magazines, take it to the museum. Well, Maggie loves history, so she kept this paper, and so she let me have it. So I was so excited that that paper was kept by the angels, in my opinion, because my parents moved 18 times. It ended up in my sister's basement. It didn't go to the museum. And God put it on my heart to go help this couple so I would get my newspaper back 75 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was your childhood like?
It was a happy childhood.
Okay.
I have lots of fun little memories. Daddy was tall, and we would sometimes go into their bedroom when we were little, and they would put their knees up in the air, underneath the covers, and we would slide down the mountains. And one of my favorite things, best things that happened is every morning before breakfast, we memorized scripture, whole chapters. And you can try it for yourself. Read Psalm 23. It'll take you less than a minute. And so we would just memorize little phrases each day, and before we knew it, we'd memorize the whole chapter. That is such a treasure to me, to have all that memory work done.
Wow.
So, yeah, we had a very happy childhood, except that I was fearful, and Daddy used to call me the official opposition, and he didn't know it was because of fear.
Okay.
And so, for example, he'd want to go up Silver Star Mountain near Vernon, where we lived. And I was, in the old days when you had to shift gears and then the car would go back just a little bit when you shifted. Well, I was so afraid it was going to go back down the mountain and over the edge. So he'd say, well, let's go on a picnic. And, oh, no, I didn't want to go. So he called me official opposition.
The official opposition.
But it was just out of fear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What did your parents do for work?
Mother was a school teacher, which she went back to years later, not when we were small. And Daddy was an electrician, And also he started the Bible school in Sexsmith, so he was very involved there in helping get it built and so forth and teaching there. And then when we moved to Three Hills, he got his journeyman's electrical papers and did a lot of wiring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah. Then later on they moved back up north here.
Okay, cool. When did you become a Christian?
Well, the first time was when I was 5 years old. We were living in Vernon, and I was afraid of the mountains.
Yeah.
And so then one night I prayed because I didn't want to go to hell. So I asked Jesus in my heart. Then when I was 12, I heard a message at Three Hills. I wasn't really even paying that much attention. But at the end, one of the things the preacher said was, if you ask Jesus into your heart as Savior but not as Lord, then you're not a Christian.
Wow.
And so I saw a lot of people going forward afterwards, including my Sunday school teacher. And I thought, well, if she's not saved, maybe I'm not either.
Yeah.
So then I went forward. And then at the end, they said, well, now if you invited Christ into your life, stand. Well, this was in the Prairie Auditorium that seated 4,000 people. I was the only one on the girl side that stood. I was, so anyway, I went and talked to somebody afterwards. And she said, well, you were probably saved before, but if you just want to make sure, do it. So I did. I was 12. But then through a crisis in Brazil, then I feel that I got a whole new dimension in my relationship with the Lord.
Okay. Tell me about that crisis in Brazil.
Okay.
What happened?
All right. I have my son's permission to tell this.
Okay.
Bless his heart. He fell in love with a Brazilian girl, and they decided to take off, and they left home very unexpectedly one morning, took a bus and went far away. And they were gone for 21 days, 19 of those days we didn't know where they were. So when they left, we went to the police station and asked the police to help us. And they said, oh, no, kids do this all the time. They'll be back in a couple of days. I said, you don't know my son. He's not coming back. Well, God took care of them. It was a miraculous story, really. But in the process, I became very angry with God. I said, if I had known you were going to do this to me, there's no way I would have come here.
Yeah.
And I said, I have tried to put you first in everything, even when I went to university. If I had an exam the next day or a paper due, I still went to prayer meeting. And I said, I went to Bible school. Here we are as missionaries with a large family. And I said, what more do you want from me? And it was quiet for a while, and then the Lord said, I don't owe you anything. I was very shocked, because I would never have had the gall to say God owed me something. But I had just finished listing it all off. So then he said, will you trust me, even if you don't understand?
Yeah.
And when your child dies, people come around and comfort you. If your child runs away from home, they treat you like the plague, because they're all thinking, what did you do to make your kid run away from home?
And maybe especially like in the Christian community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would have done the same thing if anybody else's kid had run away from home. I would have judged them too.
Yeah.
And I knew that. And we were the ideal family, which had just suddenly came crashing down from the pedestal we were on. So finally I said to the Lord, okay, you're all I've ever known, so I'll try again. But I said, I want you to know that we're starting this relationship with less than 0. I said, I know the Bible stories. I'm going to start over in Genesis, and I'm going to start reading between the lines, because I don't think I really know who you are. It was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
And I have thanked my son for running away from home, because it transformed my spiritual life. I no longer was reading the Bible to check it off as one more good thing I'd done. Not that I believed in my works, but somehow I just wanted to be this great, wonderful Christian. But now I read it because I want to find out what he's going to say to me today. Is he going to encourage me? Is he going to challenge me? Am I going to discover something more about him that I hadn't noticed before? And I'm just really excited. I'm going to be on this journey till the day I die. I just love it.
Wow. And you say that was the turning point in your
That
faith.
was the turning point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, wow,
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So obviously you got married and you had a family.
That's right.
When did you get married?
In August 3rd of 1968 in Edmonton, the Belgravia Free Church.
Okay. Tell me about your marriage and who you got married to.
Okay, I married John Enns
Okay.
from Manitoba. He came up to Bible school. My last year was his first year.
Okay.
He was 3 years older than I am, but and he was quite a new Christian. And so, yeah, we got married. And that was one of the things that if I could undo it, I wouldn't undo the marriage. It was wonderful how God brought us together, and I never once doubted that we were to be together. But I had a spiritual superiority because I had been a Christian longer than he was, and he had a temper and I didn't. And so, I wish I could undo that because it stank. I mean, pride is on God's hate list, I call it.
Yeah.
Pride is number one. And so I wish I could have changed that.
Okay.
But yeah, had a lot to learn.
Well, tell me a bit more about your marriage then. What was it
Okay.
like?
John did have a major temper issue.
Okay.
And but before we got married, I thought, this will be no problem. When he gets mad, I'll just laugh, and he'll see how funny it is. It doesn't work that way. So anyway, we had a number of years where there was all sorts of issues, and sometimes I'd say, "What did I do to deserve this?" Because he would just go into this silent, angry atmosphere, and he would say, "Oh, it isn't you," and I'd think, "Well, that's nice, but what is it?" So later on, there were at least 2 points. One was when we were still in Brazil and coming back after 4 years. John said to me, "I'm just about to give up on the Christian life. It doesn't work for me." He had memorized verses about anger. He'd gone forward at special meetings to try to get delivered from this temper of his, and nothing was working. It was just so frustrating to him. And so then I kept praying. I said, "Father, hear this man. He's crying out. Please help him." And so when we were in between, like we were in Brazil for 4 years, came back for a year, and then went back for 3 years. In that in-between year, my uncle said, "If you kids want to study anything he said, "I'll pay for it." Mm-hmm. So we went to what is now Providence College, and John was able to get his master's. And during that year, he took a counseling, what do they call that? Track. And during the counseling course, he discovered that he needed counseling himself.
Yeah.
So he went, and at first they said he was emotionally illiterate, but then they prayed for him, and God revealed the source of his anger from a childhood traumatic experience as a child. And do you think I should tell that detail or not?
Please do.
Okay. So he had been going to school in this little one-room school, and it had a porch, and then the bathrooms were out across the schoolyard. So he went out at recess to go to the bathroom, and the big boys got him and stuck him in the corner and kept him there until he wet himself.
Wow.
And the precious little guy couldn't process that, of course, but the message to his little soul was, "You're not worth saving," because nobody came and said, "Let him go."
Yeah.
And then later on, when he was about 10-ish, I think, his dad said, "We're going to go buy a 4-H calf tomorrow." Well, he was so excited he could hardly sleep.
Yeah.
Got up the next morning, and his dad had left without him.
Yeah.
So again, the message to his little heart was, "You're not worth it." So he struggled with this anger, deep down anger, for years and years, and he repressed it for so long. But then God revealed all this to him, and he came to recognize where he was a victim, but also where he was an agent, the choices that he made to make himself feel good. And so he really met the Lord in a powerful way, and he shared that with our family. And my son Philip, who was 99% Brazilian by now, he loved Brazil so much. He said, "I didn't want to come back to Canada, but," he said, "now that I see what God has done for Dad, it's been worth it."
Yeah.
And so when your own kids see it, you know it's real.
Yeah.
So God really did take his temper away, and we only saw it once after that I can remember.
Wow. Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
So that was precious.
Okay. So you guys did end up going to the mission field.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Do you want me to tell you about that issue with Dad and John?
Sure.
Okay.
Please.
So this was still when John was having major problems with his temper. Dad and John had gone down to Brazil to get our house ready for us. And while they were there, Dad wanted to do some renovations, so John was really good at drawing 3D. So he drew it all out for Dad and brought it to him the next day, and Dad said, well, I changed my mind. I'm not going to do that. Well, John just threw the paper at him. He was so mad. So then Dad gave John a bunch of Bible verses to memorize, which didn't help any. But then for some reason, Dad came back to Canada before John. I don't remember why, but I was with Mother with the children. And so Dad came back and he said to me, I don't think you and John should go as missionaries because John has a bad temper and he's going to lose his temper in front of the Nationals and ruin your ministry. Well, I went up to my bedroom and I just bawled. I said, God, I can't handle this. To go to Brazil with all it's going to take to raise support and all the finances and wait every day for my husband to possibly ruin our ministry. I said, I can't handle that. God gave me Hebrews 13:25. It is God who works in you that which is well-pleasing in his sight. And he said so clearly to me, when I say God says these things, I don't actually hear a voice. He speaks to my mind and gives me these ideas. And I know it's from him because I wouldn't have thought of them myself.
Yeah.
So he said to me, I am very pleased with what I'm doing in John's life. And I stopped crying and I said, okay, if you're pleased, well, so am I. So I started opening my hand because I'd been like this. God, you got to change my husband. You got to change my husband.
Yeah.
And that day I started opening my hand. And then 2 weeks before we left for Brazil, John and I had a disagreement about something. I can't remember. We were in our bedroom and the air was stiff. And I had not told John what my dad had said because I knew it would crush him.
Yeah.
And that day John said to me, I don't think we should go to Brazil. And a chill just went through my body. And he said, because if I can't control my temper any better than this, we shouldn't go. And I just cried out in my heart and I said, God, what can I say to this hurting man? And God said, I don't remember him saying, he just gave me the idea. And I said to John, you're right. We better not go because God only wants perfect people to work for him. And John burst out laughing. And at that time, I didn't physically do this, but in my heart, I did. I opened my hand all the way. And I thought, okay, we're going to go to Brazil and we're going to make mistakes, but God's going to bless it anyway.
Okay.
And that's what happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was the nature of your work down in Brazil?
John taught in the Bible school. The first time we went down, he taught biblical geography because my dad had taken him and my sister and my sister-in-law to Palestine. And so John had all these wonderful pictures of all these biblical places. So he was able to teach biblical geography.
Yeah.
And then he also taught doctrine, which was very hard to do in another language.
Okay.
And then I taught some piano
Yeah.
to our missionary kids and a little bit to the students as well.
Okay. Mm-hmm. If you don't mind, can you tell me a little bit more about the story of your son?
Okay.
What exactly happened there?
Okay. So our older son fell in love with a Brazilian girl.
Yeah.
And then they decided to run away.
Yes.
And it happened they left at 7:30 in the morning. I didn't know though because I had gone down to the Bible school to make lunch for the students that day. Our cook was sick. And we didn't get the notice until noon. One of Philip's friends brought us the notice saying, we've left, don't worry about us, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
So then they left and...
what was their reason for leaving? Like, why did they choose to leave?
Okay, because they had had more activity than they believed we as parents would accept, physical
Okay.
activity. And they wanted to just go out on their own and make their own life and start out that way.
Okay.
And so they went into the chapel the night before they left. We found this out afterwards and said their vows together.
Yeah.
And in their minds they were married.
Wow.
And then they were going to go to the Justice of the Peace and, get it legalized. But then that didn't work down there. We didn't know that here in Canada you can do it much younger than you can down there. Okay. But the Lord took care of them. They ended up on the streets of São Paulo, which is a city of 23 million people. They could have easily been taken advantage of, but God watched over them. Mm-hmm. And God sent a man along the street who was also a musician. My son's a musician. And he walked past them and then came back and said, "What are you guys doing here?" And so then Philip said, "I'm a musician, and my wife will probably she'll get a job as a secretary here." He said, "Well, you come home with me and I'll get you all set up." Because he had a heart for the kids, right?
Yeah.
So he took them home, and he got there, and then his wife said, "Did you forget you have to leave for Rio tonight?" And he'd totally forgotten. But God had to get him out of the picture so that his wife would make them come back home.
Yeah.
Which she did. But he left that night and she was scared to death because so many assaults happen just regularly. Every few minutes they happen there.
Okay.
And so she was scared to death these kids were going to assault her, kill her, or whatever, and take all her stuff. Yeah. So she didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning she said, "Now I'll give you money," because of course they were totally broke. "I'll give you money to go get yourself a bus ticket. Then when you come back and show me the ticket, I'll give you your stuff." Mm-hmm. So that's what they did, but then they couldn't get a ticket till the next afternoon. So they came back and they were hoping they could sleep because they were exhausted from their adventure because they were down to crackers and water. And but no, she wasn't going to let them sleep in. She was still scared to death of them. So she got them up early in the morning and said, "You go wait at the bus depot. You're not waiting here."
Yeah.
And then she'd gotten the phone number from them for the Bible school. We didn't even have a phone. And so then they called us at the Bible school. "You've got this Bible school, you've got this phone call." Well, she talked to us for over an hour. She was still just so wound up from the experience. And
wow.
So then we got her bank information, sent her money, because she'd paid for their tickets and everything.
Yeah.
And then Philip paid us back later, bless his heart. But even on their journey while they were gone, at one point we found out that these people said, "Oh, this is the most beautiful story we've ever heard. It's so romantic. This couple has run away and they're just so in love." And it was just so, and I was going, and I hated my dear Shayla to start with, and now I absolutely adore her. She couldn't.
So they did get married, and
They did.
Okay.
We had a wedding for them, and
wow.
Oma and Opa, Shayla's Oma and Opa from Germany helped us, and yes, God did a wonderful thing, and I love her to death. I couldn't have a better daughter-in-law.
Oh, praise the Lord.
Yes, yes. And my son is wonderful too in every way. He loves the Lord deeply.
Nice.
And it's precious.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you have for fathers and mothers in raising children?
You know, I probably shouldn't give any advice because I haven't done that well.
Oh, come on.
But God is merciful. You know, Steve Masterson once said in class, "All your children are going to leave home with complexes and problems."
Right.
He said, "But God planned it that way." I thought, what? He said, "If you could be perfect parents, two things would go wrong. Number one, your kids would never leave home. And second, your kids would never need God." And I said, all my kids need God. No, I think just to try to enjoy them and not take yourself too seriously. Yeah. And yes, just have as much fun as you can and try to encourage them. I didn't enjoy my children as much as I should have because I was so afraid of being proud.
Yeah.
And I watched other couples since then just doting on their kids and enjoying them so much. And I thought, oh, I thought that was a sin, and it just looks like so much fun. And I think I could have built more self-confidence in my children.
Okay.
If I hadn't been so afraid to be too proud of them.
Okay.
And yeah, and then I was pretty naive too, and I think I just never saw their struggles as much that I needed to do much about. I thought, oh well, kids are kids, they'll be fine. I wish I would have just really listened more and gotten help for some of them more. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But okay. God has been gracious, and they're wonderful people, all 6 of them.
Yeah.
And they all married wonderful people.
That's awesome.
Not without problems, but that's this world.
How many grandchildren do you have?
21.
Wow.
2 in heaven and 19 on earth.
Okay.
I'm so blessed.
Amen.
But that's one of the reasons I still teach piano, because I want to have some money to give to my grandkids for their birthdays.
Right.
They're also precious to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your husband's been passed away now for a number of years. Okay.
Yes.
How long ago did he pass?
It was December 21st of 17. So it'll be 6 years this fall.
Okay.
5.5 years, whatever.
In your experience, what makes for a good marriage?
I was trying to get my fulfillment in making him happy. And he told me years later that put him under terrible pressure because he knew he couldn't be always happy.
Yeah.
And so it was very sad. And I wish now I wouldn't have done that to him.
Yeah.
I wish I would have found, like I said to people, get your meat and potatoes from God. And then whatever your husband gives you is just dessert. You don't have to have it, but it's really nice when you get it, right? But I was trying to get everything from my John, and it was, so that's my advice. Get what you really need from the Lord, and then you're free to just be an encouragement and a joy to your husband, rather than draining him.
Because later in his life, he got dementia, and he was in a place where he couldn't really give you anything, right?
That's right.
Is that right? Okay.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
That all disappeared.
It all disappeared.
Yeah.
No meat, no potatoes.
No, nothing. No dessert there. Yeah,
No, not
after
at
a
all.
while. But, it was a 15-year process. And one of the things kind of cute, remember one night he says, we were lying in bed and he said, oh, look up there, there's a cat right there on top of the curtains. And I said, oh, isn't that interesting? You can see something I can't see. You have to go along with what they're seeing because it's very real to them, right?
Yeah.
But it took me 2 years to be able to separate my husband from the disease.
Okay.
It's very hard to do that.
Yeah.
But it's very important to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it will just be too depressing. So, for example, after he moved into care, he told me one day, I'm getting married to one of the caregivers there.
Yeah.
And she said, I am getting married, but not to you. And then another day I went in, he said, I'm married to a Brazilian. I said, oh, is she good looking? And he said, yep. I said, good for you. I figured if you're going to have another woman, at least have a good looking one. Yeah. But I just tried to joke along because by that time I had separated him from the disease because I knew that wasn't my husband.
Yeah.
And later on I figured out, actually it was after he died, I stopped to think about it and figured it out, that the reason he thought he was married to these women, because nobody else had touched him in his personal parts, but here he was every night getting washed and changed, and these must be his wives.
Oh, wow.
So imagine the confusion he went through.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So poor guy, it was very difficult for him, but he'd have moments of clarity that were such a blessing. And I'll just tell you one that was outstanding to me. We would read Daily Bread and Chuck Swindoll's Bedside Blessings each night and pray together. Yeah. And so this night it was Luke 22. Jesus was in the garden praying. And I'm reading this to John, and then it said, and an angel came and ministered to him. And he was sitting beside me, actually on this couch. And I pushed his shoulder like that. I said, John, I never noticed that before. An angel came and ministered to him in the garden there.
Yeah.
I said, I wonder what he said. I wonder if he said, I'll go through this with you, or I don't know. So anyway, we finished reading, and then almost finished reading. And John said, pencil. I thought, pencil? What do you want a pencil for? He couldn't even sign his own name anymore. So I was a little bit rude, and I said, just let me finish. Excuse me. So I finished reading, and then I went and got a pencil. I gave it to him. He said, Luke. I said, you want me to turn back to Luke? So I turned to Luke, and then he said, angel. I said, you want me to read the angel verse again? And as I was reading the angel verse, a light went on in my brain, and I looked right into his eyes. I said, John, have angels been coming and ministering to you? And his face just lit up in this huge smile. Oh, I was so thrilled because I had prayed and I'd said things like, Lord, please bless my husband. I minister to him. You know how his mind works and how it doesn't work. Just please help him.
Yeah.
And angels had been coming and ministering to him. Isn't that beautiful?
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So God gave me these little things along the way to encourage me. So, yeah. And one time I'll tell this, Dr. Renfrey loved to tell this story. He and a nurse came to see John, and John was sitting on the couch with this big, beautiful smile that he was known for. And the nurse took one look at him and she said, oh, John, are you ever looking good today? And he said, it can't be helped. So there were little gems along the way that God gave me like that. Yeah.
What advice would you give to young people?
All right. Well, this happened. John was sick already, and I was planning a trip to Ontario. I can't remember why, but I was worrying, lying in bed worrying. And I said, Lord, what am I going to do with John? And the Lord said, trust me. And I said, but when I'm traveling, how are things going to work out? What do I do with John? And he said, trust me. And finally I said, okay. I'm so rude. I don't know why God didn't wipe me off the earth already, but he's so gracious. I love it that his mercies are new every morning. Mm-hmm. So I went to sleep, and an hour later I woke up, and instantly the verse was in my brain. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps. And I thought, what? And then right away, another verse. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. He delights in his way. And I thought, well, Lord, if I don't have it in me to direct my own steps, and you're directing my steps, then what were all those scary sermons I heard when I was a young person? Like, you don't want to miss God's will. You don't want God's second best. What was that all about? And then another one he gave me later was, the Lord will guide you continually. No coffee breaks, no vacations. He's just on it. So then I realized I can just relax. My concentration is to know God and just enjoy him, and he directs my steps.
Yeah.
Takes all the pressure off.
Right.
I just love it. Yeah. So that's what I love to share with young people. Don't worry about where you're going to go to school, what you're going to do, a job, blah, blah, blah. Just get to know God, spend time with him. He takes care of the details. Wow. It's mind-boggling that he takes care of for me. I can't believe it to this day. Just all kinds of stuff.
That's a real gemstone. Go ahead.
Hi, Janet. Oh, how wonderful. God takes care of everything. Tell ya, he spoils me rotten. Thanks, darling. Love you so much. Okay, bye. Janet, a co-worker is taking her, so I don't have to go.
Perfect.
There you go. God again.
Yeah.
Just doing it.
Yeah.
That's so precious.